Namaste, group hug. Please come and join me on this sofa. Welcome to Alexandra Daly of AA Advisors. She has a consultancy helping raise capital for alternative investment businesses, which is fascinating. Running it for 13 years, I think that's correct. Perhaps, Alexandra, you'll give us a quick lowdown on your business so that the viewers understand who you are and what you do.
Karen, hi. Thank you very much for having me here today. It's great to be with you. Yes, coming out of lockdown. So AA Advisors is a business that I set up 13 years ago. And you're right, we raise money in the alternative industry. So for private equity, venture capital, real estate, and also hedge funds and some direct investments. And our clients they come from all over the world. And our LP base is also all over the world, so all over Europe, the Middle East, Switzerland, and Latin America. So it's been a really interesting ride over the years, and particularly now, because obviously connecting with people now, travel is no longer available. So we've had to really sort of like think about how we engage with our clients, during this time and also going forward. So yeah, an interesting time for us all.
And raising capital is an interesting experience generally, I think, isn't it? I mean, I say bravo for running a business where you check into these people, because actually everyone, including myself, gets relentless inquiries from people saying, oh, do you know any family offices, or do you know any rich people? And in a way, what's interesting about this scenario isn't it, is usually a person would have a meeting with them, or I'm going to say generally 99% of the time I would not, but if it's a friend of a friend who's insisting, then I will. But it's a little bit of is that body language, isn't it, which I'm assuming over Zoom is a bit lost on everyone, isn't it? So how do you do that, what people say, the whites of the eyes, and check up on people?
Yeah, it's really, really difficult. I mean, our LP base is institutional as well as family office.
What does LP mean?
So limited partners, so our investors. So our investors come from pension plans, endowments, foundations, family offices, both single and multi. And so they all move in a different way when they look at their investment and their investment profile and their returns and the risk rewards that they need. But ultimately, the main thread that all LPs, all investors need to see is, as you say, the whites of the eyes. They need to see the people who they're investing in. They need to go and they need to visit them. They need to see their offices. They need to meet the team. So in times like these, it's really interesting to try and get that level of connection. And so we, like you, have decided to do a lot of stuff online. So, for instance, we decided that instead of, calling up our investors and saying, look, what do you think of this private equity fund? They're in their final raise right now. Instead, what we're saying is that we're asking our LPs and our GPs to share their information online. And we launched a really interesting series of podcasts called AA Host. And much like yourselves, what we did was we started to engage with our managers and say, okay, let's go online, let's have a chat, let's have a fireside chat and basically discuss what your firm is doing in this very difficult period of time, what you're seeing, what the financial outlook is for you, and also what you're thinking about from a macroeconomic perspective going forward. And it's been really interesting to see sort of the feedback. And a great thing about podcasts as well is that, you can listen to it any time. So you can be sort of, doing the ironing or, going for a run, and you can at your leisure listen in. And so that's been sort of like, quite good. So, if you're trying to do homeschooling, for instance, and you're trying to work, it can sometimes be very difficult to sort of, look at a webinar and engage that way. So we wanted something that was really, really easy to do. And it's been really amazing because we've connected with, really large investors, both on the institutional and the family office side. And they've been very open about, what's important to them now. And I think that, we're in the middle of the pandemic. We are also in the middle of a really exciting time because what we've got here is a reset. And we're absolutely excited by it, because it's now that the companies of the future are being founded today. And so with AA Host, it's been, wonderful to hear this, because I think that, you have to try and look at the positivity of where we are. And I think that there will be opportunities. So asset raising is, it's my business. I love it. I'm passionate about it. It's great. And we've all worked really well from home. We do, our sort of, our morning and our afternoon, sort of Zoom calls. And I have to say that we have never, ever been busier.
Yes, well, we'll come back to that. So until tomorrow is our first segment, and this came up on Instagram. It's a bit of an old school thing now, so we're now original gangsters. But it's posting embarrassing pictures of yourself, and this is really just to make some more interesting connection with the viewer, because I think in my head, a lot of financial services in the past has been a lot of jargon, and one of the things that Citywealth does is debunk jargon. And so when people send us technical stuff, we go, well, look, if you're the PR person and you don't know what it means, why are we going to publish it? We're not going to spend like 4 days trying to decode it. So we only want to put out stuff that actually ABC, people can actually read it and understand it. And in my head, that's going to bring more people to the industry. But we've got some lovely pictures of you coming up, and you as a child going to school. And weirdly, I think Jaguar cars were so cool, weren't they? They were probably, in the olden days, they were like a Ferrari. Everyone, because of the Sweeney TV show, I think, wasn't it? Like,
I know.
Which is definitely OG, original gangster. And then
I love the Sweeney.
Yeah. And then there's a picture, there's a group picture which is something about the Red Cross, and then you dressed up in fancy dress. So give me some thoughts about what these pictures are.
Yeah, so my dad was a dentist, and we used to live above our surgery. And so I was always, even from a very small child, really fascinated about the caring industry, even though I actually went into financial services. So I'm doing something now which feeds into the medical side now, which is really exciting. And so as a kid, I really wanted to, sort of join the Red Cross. So I joined the Red Cross, and the picture that you see there is of me on my first day joining the Red Cross. And I'm the little girl just at the end with her legs crossed on the right-hand side. Very, very
we'll have a look afterwards.
Yeah. And so that's kind of like, the genesis of that. And then, of course, the Jaguar. So the Jaguar car, that was my father's,
pride and joy.
Pride and joy, I have to say. And so, it is, I always, whenever I see a Jaguar now, I always think of, my dad. So yeah, it was a lovely, lovely time.
I think you're quite right. They were pride and joy in those days, weren't they? So staying sane, how are you staying sane? So this week I did a Google Ads course with the London School of Journalism, Zooming, and actually it was quite fun, weirdly. But I worked out now that I can now do a Google ad for Citywealth, which targets, for instance, you by your postcode, you by your age group, and I can target you by whether you have kids who are 4, 5, 6, 7, or 8 years old specifically. If you are gay, straight, the segments are able to be picked by audience in Google Ads. And I had not seen that before. So that was quite an interesting revelation for my week. So how about you? How are you staying sane?
Yeah, the analytics are great nowadays, aren't they? You can really tell a lot.
It's scary. Yeah.
It's scary, but it's also really interesting. It can be quite sort of, strategically used as well. And we do that as well in our business. We always make sure that we're efficient with who we are marketing to. So things like that are really helpful. But staying sane, I mean, I have to say that I'm from the countryside. I'm from Essex. And so, I was born in the countryside, and I love going out for a walk. And I love walking our dogs and just getting outside and sort of, getting fresh air. And that's been really important, because I don't know about you, but even though we've been in lockdown, we've been really busy. And so your days are full of Zoom calls. Literally, the schedule is sort of like, every hour there's something going on. So before you know where you are, you could be in a position whereby, you haven't moved. Whereas, if you're commuting to work, you're maybe bike riding to work, or maybe you're taking lunch, or, you've got a cut-off. Whereas right now, there's really no cut-off between home and work. And so the danger there is that you just spend your whole time in front of your screen. And, we're always telling kids, not too much screen time, let's cut it up. Well, let's listen to that ourselves. So to stay sane, I've been walking and, running a little bit outside, and really kind of taking things sort of, simply, and, without being sort of like too cheesy, really enjoying the sort of like the little things in life that, if you're a busy person, you sometimes, overlook. So, I mean, sanity. And of course, I've done everything that everybody does as well, which is definitely be watching a lot of Netflix and, sort of Prime Video and all of that. I have to say that, I've become pretty obsessed with some of the series that are out there as well. So, totally guilty where that's concerned.
Well, I think we've all turned into Villanelle on Killing Eve, haven't we? Like,
oh God, did you see it last night? I love it. What she wears is great.
It's like fashion and a cool woman and everything, isn't it? It's amazing.
Yeah.
So we'll just quickly blip on to work from home, because I think you kind of did that already. But we've got a lovely picture of you with your dogs, and I think you said one of them's Coco. I can't remember, but go on.
Yeah, so the dogs have been really interesting. We're calling them our canine captains, because in all the Zoom calls we've been having, they've also wanted to participate. So most of our clients and our investors now know about the dogs. And I've got one particular dog called Fang. And Fang is a Shih Tzu. And he is always in deep meditation, but he snores a lot. So we'll be, on a call and we'll hear this. And, I'd be like, oh, it's not me, honestly. It's the
Don't
dogs.
worry, it's just Fang. Yeah.
Just Fang, nothing to
He's
see
having a
here.
nap. He's having a Zoom nap. He's stressed out. But in a way, I think what's been really quite charming about doing these YouTube live chats is that actually there is just that experience of just seeing someone in their normal home environment, which usually, unless you're close friends with people, that's not so much done, really, is it, in the city? So it's been quite charming. So have you got any lessons for people working from home that would help them?
Well, I think that kind of like the main lesson that I try to adopt, and that is to try and be as balanced as possible. So, sort of really, as we said, sort of like try and take time out of your day so that you're not just in front of your PC the whole time. I think organization is really important. So sort of like organize your day, know what you're doing, and, sort of remember that I think, one of the most important, things to think about is to be connected, to reach out to people. So, what I've been doing quite a bit is, as well as speaking to, our investors and our clients, I've also been speaking to my mates. I've also been speaking to my friends, some of whom, I wouldn't necessarily have picked up the phone to, but I have. And it's been great because everybody, no matter where they are in the world, is having the similar experiences. So we've been doing a lot of, the house party stuff.
I haven't tried that yet. I haven't tried that yet. I'm lagging behind.
That's been quite good. So I try to kind of connect in with friends at the end of the day. So you've just got kind of that little sort of, break.
Decompress.
Exactly. Yeah. And the other thing that I've also been doing, which has been useful for me, is that I've also been connecting in with other marketers from other firms. So I've been doing this for about 18 years, and I'm blessed to have built up a great network of, professional friends and colleagues throughout the industry. So I've been connecting in with them and asking them what they're seeing and what their firms are doing. And it's been different from, the different countries are reacting in different ways. So we speak to people in Sweden, we speak to people in, the US, And it's really interesting to see what's happening in the various different cultures and countries. So I think that I'll look back on this time with fond memories, because it's been a wonderful time to be engaged, to reach out to people that you might not have reached out to if you're in your normal working life, and to be able to focus and really think about your business. Because in times like these, you can pivot, you can, seize the opportunity. You've got the time to think about where you want to go and observe, and you can reset appropriately. So I have to say that I've enjoyed it. I've enjoyed it. I think it's been
and
great.
in a way, well, we'll move on now to business law, and we're going to talk about more sort of general environmental issues and your Rose project, Rose Review. But I think in a way, being an entrepreneur, which people do not understand, is adversity is part of the role of being an entrepreneur, isn't it? Actually, it's not all like, oh, I'm rich and look at me. It's actually, what do you do when someone chucks you down a hole? Oops, I've got to work out how to get out. And that's the difficulty. And I think if you've been in business enough time, even if you're a startup right now, your ability to work out how to get out of the hole is what classifies you as an actual entrepreneur, doesn't it? So actually, this is a normal part of running a business, isn't it? But most people don't get that. They think it's, oh, just I'm running a business, so therefore I'm very famous and I'm a big entrepreneur. But going down the hole is the survival, is what a true entrepreneur does, isn't it?
It really is. I mean, Alex in Wonderland. I mean, literally that whole, you're so right, Karen. I mean, when I set up my business, it was sadly really bad timing, and the global financial crisis had just hit. And I went from being in, sort of a job with, a paycheck and, everything around me, all your systems around you working and colleagues and everything, to, setting up my business being really exciting. And then, 2008 hit, and I was like, oh my God, I've got now no clients. I've got now really no money coming in. I spent all my money setting up this business, and I'm not really sure what to do. And so I set up my business in the worst time ever. And it was literally at that point that you dig deep into your resilience. And I remember my dad saying to me, you've gone from, a job where people pay you, and now you've got, bills, you've got mortgages, you've got a dog, what are you going to do? And I was really lucky in the respect that I had a fantastic mentor. And I'll talk more about that. Mentors are really, really important. And she was a super lady who was my old CEO. And she gave me a roof over my head. And she gave me, a job as part of their hedge fund. And I began, sort of going back again and baby steps. And just really kind of like being, just having that kind of strength of thought to be able to just say, okay, everything is going wrong around me, but I believe in what I want to do, and I'm going to make some tough decisions, but what I'm going to do is I'm going to give it my best shot. And I think that is part of being an entrepreneur, is to kind of dig deep and give it your best shot. And by the way, if your best shot doesn't work out, that's also cool, because then that means that door wasn't meant to open for you and there's something else for you. But I think to not give up and to just be sort of resilient is really important.
It's just a tough road, isn't it? Which people, I guess that's all I'm saying. That it's a lot tougher than people think, and part of being down a hole is part of being an entrepreneur, isn't it? But let's move on to business. So, what do you think of all these government measures? I found it quite interesting that I believe, obviously, everyone's having to run because they don't get it, but perhaps Russia had a panic plan already. Britain didn't. What do you think of the measures? And maybe talk to us about the Rose Review, which is about financing female businesses, which you said again are part of government initiative.
Well, I'm passionate about female entrepreneurs. I'm passionate about women in the workplace. So back in 2016, I joined a cross-party politics group on access to finance and women in enterprise. And basically,
so explain who they are, because I did read that in your blog, but I don't know if I know who they are.
So an APPG, that's an across-party politics group. These were groups that were set up, and basically they're a way for people from the financial services industry, or any industry actually, to come together in a forum and speak to, the House of Lords and the House of Commons about what they see in their environment and share their views. And as part of this APPG group that I was asked to join, I was sitting there with RBS NatWest, and I was representing the alternatives industry on the funding side, because that's what we do as a business, and RBS was the banking side. And RBS was then asked to do by Treasury, Alison Rose, now the CEO of RBS NatWest, and the first ever woman CEO of a major UK bank, was asked to basically put together a report on where funding is for female entrepreneurs in the UK now. And the report showed up lots of different facets. And in particular, one facet which we commentated on was the fact that only 1% of VC money gets allocated to female-run businesses. And why is that? And so we, as part of our everyday, lives, raise money for VC, so for venture capital firms. And our comment was very, very simple. I like simple things in life. And it was basically, if you want to influence how a venture capital fund puts money to work, you need to speak to their investor base. And you need to engage with the investor base and let them know that there are opportunities that could be allocated to. So we brought this to Alison and RBS NatWest and then the Treasury. And they said, that's a great idea. So basically, if we reach out to the LPs, the limited partners, the investors, and let them know that, potentially there are a lot of female-run businesses that need and could look at funding, then this can influence the venture capital funds to start actively looking for these female businesses. And so RBS said, well, how are you going to do this? And we were like, well, we're going to need some help from our friends. So we put together a fantastic council. It's called the Council for Investing in Female Entrepreneurs. And I was staggered at the response that we received from the financial services community in the UK. Our council has all the major banks on it. So, obviously RBS NatWest, Goldman Sachs, JP Morgan, Morgan Stanley, Merrill Lynch, Schroders, the British Business Bank. We've got Atomico, one of the largest, most successful VCs. We've got Summit Partners from the private equity side. We have got KPMG. We've got the Law Society for England and Wales, to name but a few. So we tried to make our council representative of the financial services community. And all these groups want to push through a change and highlight females in business. And to bring round to your point on funding, it's very important, particularly now, because now female entrepreneurs have never experienced such a difficult time to access funding. And so we've had 3 meetings now. Most of them tend to be at Treasury. And what we're looking at is the barriers that females face in funding, but also how to access these government loans, these bounce back schemes, and how to make this of ease and efficient. And transparency is really the thing here, because it's just a way of knowing through going online the types of loan facilities that you as your business want to achieve, how long the loan period should be for you, and to really kind of understand and receive help from not just banks, but also from lots of private equity and venture capital funders. And so our goal is to highlight the different areas of access that you can get to liquidity as a female entrepreneur.
Well, that's all excellent news, isn't it? And I think in my head, weirdly, we're doing these live chats. Tons of calls from men to do it, no calls from women to do it, and there is slightly something, isn't there, that women need to actually. I guess it's this whole step forward or lean in thing, isn't it? Be brave and step up. And even one of my friends has got a business, and she's like, "Oh, well, I made some money, so look at me." Like she's not going to do anything else. I was like, "Lady, come on, what are you doing next? Come on, you're only as good as today. Tomorrow, this is an old story. You've got to keep thinking, moving ahead, push, innovate, make some more money. How are you changing? How are you getting more money from these people you just got money from? Like you've got to be more aggressive in your outlook." And it's interesting, isn't it? Probably maybe we need in kindergarten or something, some kind of women's entrepreneurial school or something.
Absolutely. I was just about to say that, Karen. So, this is not a change that's going to happen overnight. This is going to be a lifetime, and it starts from grassroots. It starts from school, and it starts from, sort of looking at the STEM subjects, which are really important to promote. And it also is looking at, mentors. I think mentors are really, really important for everybody's life, not just women's lives. And they were definitely important in my professional life because a mentor, a role model, someone that goes before you and really sort of paves the way and is able to, sort of advise you is really important to have. And in actual fact, women are really good at having mentors because women are great to receive information, whereas men can sometimes be, "I got this one, okay, I know what I'm doing." Whereas women will listen, and that way they can soak up some really good information, and they're also really good at applying that information. So interestingly enough, I think that in times like these, women will come into their own because also they're sort of very cautious, they're resilient, and they're able to measure risk. So I think that it's that balance. It's that balance of being able to see opportunity, but also, sort of balance it with being careful about, your cash reserves and, looking at growth, but growth that you can afford.
So let's have a look at your business now and what. So I heard couple of interesting stories on the private equity side, which I'm sure are just hearsay and absolute rubbish. But one was, well, private equity by its very nature is putting debt into a business to scale it. So how does that work when you don't have any cash flow? I sent you a little heads up before. For instance, dentistry is just shut down. Hospitality is just shut down unless they're working out. So who even knows what the income is now compared to before? Probably 10%, even if you're doing delivery to 100%. So how does that work in a private equity business now? And then also I heard of a business which was a high street chain, which was going to have the plug pulled on it because the private equity people said, "Well, you're not servicing the debt. We don't believe you have scaled up. You've let us down." And COVID hit and they said, "Oh, well, it looks like we can all just not pay our bills for a while. So let's put this on pause and just see what happens. And actually maybe we can rescue this business with a bit of time to manage it." So it's a very big thing for family offices and big families in the last 5 years. They all started to do joint deals or personal deals. And we had an article previously which you commented on. So what are your thoughts on this as a specialist who's raising capital in that market?
Well, I think that there is through, sort of government stimulus, there's a lot of cheap money around right now. And also there's a lot of opportunity in the secondaries market and the distressed market and some of the credit markets. So we've seen some really interesting sell-offs in the public markets, and they've actually, sort of performed really, really interestingly. Who knows what's going to happen?
Have you got an example you can share with us?
Well, sure, absolutely. So I would say when we think, I'm going to go back to the example that you've used. So there are certain industries that we know will probably have to change completely and will not necessarily recover, but we'll find it very, very difficult to get out of this. And that is aviation. So the aviation industry, oil and gas, as you said, the hospitality industry in respect to hotels. And to give you an example of this, we have been shown some really interesting deal flow on distressed opportunities in the hotel space right the way across Northern America.
And so does that include the assets of the hotel, like the building, which is usually what people want, isn't it? Trophy assets with cash flow, which is fundamentally all a hotel business is.
So different sites will have different complexions to them. If the operator is the owner of that site, which sometimes happens, but more invariably does not in the deal flow that we've seen, then what happens is that you're going to be buying the contractual agreements between the operator and the freeholder. So the person that's going to be coming in, maybe the private equity business that's going to be coming in, is going to have to take over, that debt. But generally what's happening is that we're seeing, sort of funds being originated in the secondary space that look at these distressed opportunities. And that will be very interesting. And so I think that, there will be in the future good yields to be had from that. And so when we look at the private markets, and we are overweight private markets, so we distribute mainly for VC and private equity businesses. And I'll share an example of one of them, Noventa. They're a Swiss-based VC. They're great, and they invested in a business before all of this called Happy Fresh. And Happy Fresh is a Southeast Asian online delivery business. And they invested in this not knowing that COVID was going to happen. Well, that business has gone from strength to strength. And interestingly enough, now when we spoke to the CEO of Happy Fresh, he was saying to us that the dynamics of that business have changed, because before it was sort of younger people, people that work that would access their online facilities in order to get their groceries. Now it's the older people, the people like my mum and, my stepdad in, their 60s and 70s that are having to go online. And so from a growth perspective, that business has changed exponentially. And so I think that, and that was, sort of one particular sort of company that this VC had in their portfolio that has gone from strength to strength. We've seen some really interesting, sort of opportunities as well in, the tech space. So going forward, I think that, from the private market perspective, when we think about, sort of deep value tech, that's also going to be a main driver. So I think it's, and how do investors think about this? So if you're looking at an investor, they might have a balanced portfolio full of, public and private markets. So the public markets being sort of fixed income, sort of equities, credit, and that's harder to play because those are the liquid markets, and you've really got to be very comfortable with what you're doing. Whereas in the private markets, what you're doing is that you're looking with, say, your lenses of, say, 2, 3, 5, or even 10 years. And so you're kind of like thinking about maybe a safer haven, but you've got to be sort of, very much bullish about this particular, company is going to do well.
So from my point of view as media in private wealth, we've seen an enormous amount of hotels owned by private individuals who clearly are sitting on the asset and probably bought them fairly cheap, and they're worth whatever they were worth, and maybe they're worth less now, but with operating businesses in them. That's probably a fairly steady market, I would say, although obviously the cash flow has disappeared from them. But there's definitely businesses like Dentistry, where if you were in a private equity model, even as an investor, that's going to come back, isn't it? But like nobody can say right now, Alexandra, I'm going to drill your mouth, have blood all over me, all your spit all over me, gross. There's not a lead back into that, is there? So like, can these businesses survive, and what happens then? I mean, what's the bad news in that situation?
I mean, being a dentist daughter,
Well, quite, yeah.
I'm all up for the integrity of dentists surviving this economic downturn, and they will, because
of course. I mean, we need dentists, don't we?
We need
no
dentists.
Problem, yeah.
We need dentists. However, fundamentally, there may be some procedures that are going to have to be put in place whereby, the whole sort of the safety orientation is really, really strong. And, maybe sort of, some of the devices that you're using also need to take into consideration COVID. So I think that, again, that's a business that is going to pivot, but the underlying business is good because that's a need, that is a demand, and that is something that we're always going to want. I think that when we think about the aviation industry, for instance, that is an industry that is going to have to pivot because, we're looking at potentially, prices going up very high for people to travel when they can travel. If they can travel, nobody can tell. And that was already an industry that had, a lot of difficulty. It was expensive to run. It was highly regulated. And it was always very much in competition with making sure through, economy airlines that sort of the movements were, sort of cheap. And so there was always a tussle in that industry. It was already a difficult industry to transact in. So it'll be interesting to see what happens with that business going forward. But again, the economy, Karen, is something that always survives. It always regenerates. And it's just making sure from an investor perspective that you're on the right side of the trade.
Interesting. So we'll just do, I think we're running out of time, but we'll do a quick talk on blockchain because that's a personal interest to me. But one of the things I see is terribly wrong with that industry, even with the very big names, big players, and we know that they include the Winklevoss twins who famously fell out with Facebook owner and all that kind of stuff. But to me, they never address the elephant in the room, which is there's been a lot of fraud in that industry, a lot of uncertainty about that industry, even a lot of big players disappear overnight or they get hacked and defrauded. And there's a big play right now, isn't there, on digital, and maybe this is the answer, despite clearly underlying problems and structure with the whole mechanics and software, which is just not as good as Visa is in terms of transactional quantities day by day. So what's your take on that? I mean, I guess you're in an interesting position putting those businesses into a good shape to get investment into them, which the amount of them I see, even the big names, I'm like, why would people do this? But now with people looking at digital, Bitcoin and prices going up with the halving, I mean, is that in good shape?
Well, I think that if we think about blockchain, we think about sort of the age of digital awareness. So, and in actual fact, I've just founded a business called iFertility, which uses digitalization, and it's the first online fertility screening business whereby you can freeze your eggs. You get the access to freeze your eggs online, and you are able to very easily and very efficiently be able to fill in a questionnaire about your health and basically be matched to doctors and nurses who are able to assist you in this process. So I think, and this feeds into, sort of my absolute sort of, passion about making sure that nothing hampers a woman from business. And I think that, one of the things that we often think about when women aren't in businesses is the fact that they have to think about their fertility. And what iStars is that takes that issue away through online matching and through an online platform. And so, blockchain is really interesting from that side. And I think that, digitalization is here for life. Our lives are going to go more on screen. And we think about blockchain and we think about cryptocurrencies. That is something that is very much a, unregulated industry at the moment. It is an industry that is immature, and I think it's an industry that is with us. That it needs to basically be sort of become more streamlined and regulated. And I think that it's to run and run. But I think that, we all now, particularly because of COVID-19, are doing so much more online. And I have to say that this is something that is going to stay with us for the rest of our lives and will only increase.
So I think we'll skip the location part. I know you're in a gorgeous place, and there was a quick picture of a bluebell wood. It's fabulous, by the way, and I know Essex is a beautiful place. So let's just do post-COVID. How is everything shaping up? I mean, we did a lot with the offshore market, and some of them have been told there'll be no flights till September. Now today we hear that maybe churches will reopen, so weddings can start happening again, which seems to be a lot earlier than people thought. So post-COVID, what's your predictions? And maybe you give us some advice, sort of what we're saying is, from where you are, perhaps we heard, for instance, in Zug that a lot of the startups have gone bust or disappeared because they just couldn't get more funding, or perhaps you can give us 3 bits of advice for businesses who are in that situation. But give us a quick take on post-COVID first.
I think that post-COVID things are going to change. I think that how we work is going to change. I think that how we interact is going to change. And I think how we travel. I think that, with the new normal is going to be with us quite soon. And I think that we are, as a society, going to have to think about what is fundamentally important to us. And so for the first time in many, many years, a lot of us are going to be staying in our own states, in our own countries, and really sort of, connecting and connecting back. I think from a business perspective, the rules always apply. Cash management, cash preservation. Make sure that you're not putting too much risk on if you can't afford to. Make sure that your business is able to be flexible, nimble, and to be able to pivot. Understand about your competitive landscape and really think about any aggressive moves right now. Make sure that you have a good trajectory for the next sort of 6 to 9 to 18 months, and make sure that you have the cash to be able to manage those expectations. That's really key. If you're seeking government loans, make sure that you understand which one is the one and the most appropriate one for you. Make sure you can pay it back, and also just reach out to people. Reach out to your colleagues. Reach out to people in your community, and get information through. And by the way, if it doesn't work out, it's not the end of the world. There's something else out there for you.
So just finishing off, the aggressive move is that, because a lot of people are saying, as you pointed out earlier, there's cheap debt around. So is an aggressive move that a business needs to scale up, and this is a sort of a unique time in history to take money, whereas before it would have been tougher, even if you need to pay it back, obviously. Is that the aggressive move?
I think that I personally don't like aggressive moves. I like bullish, calculated moves that are going to give you a good yield to your portfolio. So I am not volatile in my outlook. I'm more sort of, steady Eddie. I agree with taking opportunity. And there is a lot of, sort of interesting cash out there that is at very cheap interest rates. So, why wouldn't you? But at the end of the day, someone's got to pay for that. And so, jam now, austerity later is not great. I'm all about balance and conservativeness. So I think, be aware of the sort of the cash that is around at cheap rates, but also understand that if you're going to do that, make sure you can pay it back. Or if you're going to play in the public markets and you're going to, sort of be right there in the middle of, credit spreads widening, make sure that you're hedged appropriately.
Very good. Okay, I think we'll finish off there. So thank you so much, Alexandra. It's a
Karen.
pleasure to meet you and have a chat with you.
Pleasure.
What I would ask the viewers to do is, if they enjoyed the talk, if they can press the thumbs up and follow us. We will be back on Friday, 11 o'clock. But for now, we look forward to seeing Alexandra in better times, post-Zoomy, where we can maybe have a glass of something delicious, water, if people are not drinking, or perhaps a glass of champagne. So thank you very much, Alexandra. Double thumb.